What's up, y'all? Welcome to a new segment, new podcast, new something.
Is it a new segment, or is it a podcast? Is this Free China Pod?
Kind of its own pod, but I don't have a name for it, and it's going to be hosted on the same feed.
Oh,
so,
then it's just a segment.
History bits. I don't know. We're thinking of a name. If you got good ideas for a name, hit me with them. But yeah, just going over some history, and since I feel like since it is June 4th today, Arya and I are sitting outside in our Mao suits with our little red books, and ready to get into this this Tiananmen story. So, first, I was gonna say, I like doing research for this. There's so much, like,
fake news.
I wouldn't say fake news, but differing stories, because a lot of it's just like people's firsthand accounts, or maybe their mismemories of things and things like that. And I think even starting from the idea of like calling it the Tiananmen Square Massacre is a little bit of a misnomer in and of itself, because most of the killing, at least from all the documentation that I've been able to read, is it's like around the square.
But what else would they call it? Like Metropolitan Beijing Massacre?
Yeah, the Western Central Beijing Massacre.
I mean,
I get it. The
center of the protest was in Tiananmen, right?
True. So the Tiananmen Square protests, but I don't know if I would call them. I mean, obviously, I'm still going to use the Tiananmen Square Massacre because that's what everyone calls it. But I'm just saying, I think even that's a bit misleading. But yeah,
you sound just like Jabrizia.
We need to be very specific in our
Don't name
words.
it after places.
We can't use place names. That is going to affect the local populations there.
We're not going to cover everything. We are going to cover a lot of history in this, but we can't go through everything.
I'm glad my cell phone's charged.
Hopefully next year I want to do it again. I want to do it again. Because this is kind of like a first draft. Because there's a number of sources that I wanted to get and comb through, but there's numerous problems with finding some of those sources. But hopefully I can get in contact with people who can help me find them, or I can go to a library and get them to mail it over. But we'll see. So obviously lots of conflict, lots of things like that. So if you guys think we missed anything, well then fuck you. Just kidding. You can email us or send us a message and let us know. All right. So where we're going to start, Ari, of course, is the Song Dynasty.
Oh,
just
geez.
kidding. Just kidding. I think it is interesting. We obviously should start a little bit in the Cultural Revolution. So Ari, what do you know about the Cultural Revolution? Good time, right?
Well, it all started in the 1950s when Mao decided that he was losing power, and
I guess he decided that the way he could get it back was to kind of cut at the ideological underpinnings of the party elite by creating a kind of bottom-up revolution.
Yeah.
That basically became the Cultural Revolution. This idea that the party elites were becoming too heterodox, and they were straying from the original ideas of the revolution, and that they needed some challenge from the kind of like red-blooded what do they call them?
Proletariat, the Red
soldiers.
Guard,
the Red Guard, yeah, like this young cadres who
mostly like junior high to university age students who were super radicalized, and like I think some people like end up blaming a lot of it on like the deaths on the Red Guards, which is kind of fair, but I think also a lot of it rests also, of course, on the government itself, because I mean they're ordering a lot. But yeah, because the state should have
stood down, right?
Yeah, and obviously the government should have the monopoly on violence, but yeah, most of what these Red Guards did, like, again, these are
That's not what you say on our normal podcast.
These are children, and they're like marching basically their teacher. They're basically supposed to find like quote unquote rightists and counter-revolutionaries, and like they would march them through the streets in dunce hats and shit and make them. I mean, they drove a ton of people to suicide, but there's also massacres and things like that. So.
From what I heard, there were a lot of circumstances where it was basically just like opportunism, where like if you were friends with somebody who was in the Red Guard, you'd use them to either kill or remove from power one of your rivals and then take power yourself. So it was like kind of a way for a lot of people to just like a lot
settle
of
old
purges.
scores.
Yeah, settle old scores.
That's one of the things that I was thinking about when I was writing through this is like how similar it is, because this year I've been doing a lot of medieval history.
Ugh.
How similar it is to like these like witch hunts, like, and same thing in like colonial America. Like these witch hunts, it's just like these moral panics start, and it's just an excuse to like, and it happens even to today. I mean, with like the satanic panic in the 1980s and stuff, like going after people that you have like old
The
beefs
January
with.
6ers.
Yeah, they're coming after our beautiful boys and girls. yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I think that's what a lot of it is settling these old scores. Of course, they say it's and a lot of it was going after the stinking old ninth, which is basically means the intellectuals, right? So a ton of intellectuals
I
died.
don't get it. Why that term?
The term that stinking old ninth comes from the Yuan dynasty, and they basically divided people into classes, and Confucian scholars were called the ninth. They were the ninth group. So then when they wanted to purge these Confucian scholars, they called them the stinky old ninth. So they brought it back during the Cultural Revolution and used it for that. So obviously most people know like the stories of like a lot of these like East and Southeast Asian communist purges. Usually a lot of them are going after intellectuals. I mean, Pol Pot, obviously anyone with glasses, everyone knows that kind of stuff. So, and a lot of the young intellectuals like would get, not all of them got killed, obviously. A lot of them, like Ari kind of mentioned, would get shipped out to farms. And eventually a lot of the Red Guard actually got shipped out to farms too, because Mao realized that he was like starting to lose power to them, and they were kind of getting out of control. Like he couldn't keep a lid on it anymore, and so he started shipping them out. And that actually leads to a lot of the Red Guards feeling abandoned by Mao. And they're also purging a lot of the figures that we'll talk about throughout this whole thing were also purged, like Deng Xiaoping, who got purged twice, and Hu Yaobang, who also got purged twice. Like all these people that just get purged multiple times and then eventually come back. A lot of them come back after Mao dies. So another thing I wanted to talk about is the Lin Biao. So we're going to kind of skip over like a few of the major incidents leading up to this. But Lin Biao was basically, he was the vice chairman of the Communist Party and the head of the military. And they accused him of, do you know Lin Biao?
Yeah, he died in a plane crash.
Or did he, Ari? Is that just the story that they want you to know?
No, he did.
I mean, there's actually some people think that actually he didn't, but and like so, not just like conspiracy theories on the internet. Like some legitimate like intelligence sources think that he was actually killed. There was a plane crash in Mongolia, but like we don't know. I tend to say I have no clue, but it's in terms of the reason he was purged and was allegedly fleeing to the USSR was because they claimed he was trying to do a military coup.
Yeah, I remember that now.
But it's weird because Lin Biao was not very close to the USSR and actually had criticized them multiple times. Doesn't mean he wasn't fleeing there if he thought it was safer than staying in China with Mao. But that also kind of makes people like a little bit worried about this sort of like corruption in these politics of Mao just like getting rid of everyone that he doesn't like, which was kind of his style. Another thing,
in the lead up to the Cultural Revolution, I mean, Mao was almost purged from his old party because his economic policies were, let's just say, grounded in the 1850s. It's like a cave dwelling, basically Taliban guy. Like you can't really
paleo Marxist.
Yeah, you can't really run like a modern industrializing country with like backwards ideas like that, which is why so many people died after he resumed. I don't want to say totally resumed power, but he he came back to the zenith of the Chinese Communist Party after, as a result of the Cultural Revolution. And a lot of people died because of his fucking
Mismanagement.
his backwards ideas. He was like
Killing all the sparrows. Like,
he was just, I'm not gonna say he was illiterate, but he was not. He didn't seem personally capable of running a country with, at the time, what, 300, 400 million people.
yeah.
Like, I don't mean personally that he wasn't capable as a person. I mean personally as in one person, since he was trying to centralize power, that he did not have the expertise.
Or
in a lot of fields.
I would argue, or the infrastructure to run it like that, especially with very few checks on like actual corruption and things like that. Like, yeah, it's not easy to run
Should
like
I get closer to the mic?
I don't know. I think it's okay.
You sure?
You can get a little closer if you want. I don't know. I haven't been checking the levels.
I'll get a little closer.
So
everyone can hear my sharp retorts.
yeah, I do think that's definitely true. He was
A bald man.
he's a good swimmer. We can say that. He's a very good swimmer.
I don't know about that.
That's true. He was.
I think some of those things were staged, so public events.
Well, now who's the conspiracy theorist?
Still you.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Don't smear me. Smear merchant.
Didn't they say he like swam across? I remember there was one public event. It was insane. They were saying he swam like thousands of meters or something like that through like strong currents, and it just seemed like total bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's like a 70-year-old man.
I don't know about that, but that's There's of course there's like this exaggerated cult of personality, and of course things like that were staged to make him look like the great leader.
Kim Jong-un was born in the volcano to a unicorn.
I mean, under a double rainbow.
Yeah, under a double rainbow. There's a lot of bullshit from these, like, especially in that era. Like, anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I think emblematic of kind of what I was talking about is like there's this growing climate of like discontent, political discontent, and you had a man named Yizhe publish a paper called on Socialist Democracy in the Legal System. So this was in the lead up to what we'll talk about in a little bit, which is Democracy Wall. So these people basically coming and
wait, when was this? In the 80s?
This was in 1974.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is while Mao was still in power.
Yeah. This is while Mao
right
was
before he
still in power.
died, right? Would he die in 75?
76.
Okay.
Yeah, he died in September 76. So we had this paper basically was written by 3 former Red Guards, and it basically started to circulate pretty widely. And I think one thing that has to be kept in mind when we talk about this is we're going to be using the word democracy a lot, but it's not always like quote unquote like Western style like full democracy. A lot of people are just talking about like simple reforms or like opening up elections to like more than one party, or even having more than one candidate in the quote unquote elections that the CCP was having. So it's a broad term that we're using, but it doesn't always mean like what people who might be listening in like America or even in Taiwan might think of like as democracy. So be careful with that, and I'll try to like be specific about what like certain people thought at certain times. But these 3 authors, these 2 former Red Guards, they started circulating this paper, and they're basically just the 2 things that they mainly covered were the problems of corruption inside the Chinese system, especially during the Cultural Revolution, which they obviously witnessed firsthand as Red Guards, and also the need to practice some sorts of democracy and have some of these sorts of reforms, and also the importance of a legitimate legal system inside the state. Okay, so you're having this kind of like push for broadening discussions, I guess I should say, of people who are not just like, oh, we just need to follow Mao thought and Marx anymore. There's like, maybe we should have democratic reforms. These ideas are starting to spread like a democracy virus. So then soon after this, we have the Tiananmen incident, but not the Tiananmen Square incident of 1989. We have the 76. I think a lot of people don't really know that there was another Tiananmen incident.
Every time I Google it, it's always funny to see the was that the May 4th incident?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's what always shows up. Not Google it. I looked on what's it?
Wikipedia.
No, the Chinese like Quora. What is it? Zhi something. I don't remember. But anyway, I looked it up recently, and yeah, everything that shows up is always like a May 4th incident.
Yeah, because they've basically like whitewashed it by now. It's a lot. This
You mean
one,
the June 4th incident.
this one is a lot easier to whitewash than the '89 incident. So this mainly revolves around Zhou Enlai, who's quite heavily respected at this time. A lot of people kind of see him as like a somewhat of a reformer, as maybe like a foil to Mao, who was generally seen. Interestingly,
What was his position again?
he's the premier.
Okay.
Okay, so, but yeah, like I was saying, he's pretty respected at the time, starting to push back a little bit. He pushed pretty hard for modernizations.
He's the one who was like in control after Mao died, who kind of
No, he
well,
wasn't.
there was the Gang of Four. I mean, I
Gang
remember,
of Four. Yeah,
But I remember where
mention
was he?
briefly.
Because he was involved somehow in like the kind of something with Deng, right?
I mean, he was, but not when Deng was president, because Zhou Enlai dies before Mao dies.
Oh,
You might be
really?
thinking about Hu Yaobang or
I don't know. Keep going.
okay. Anyway, he's pushing for the four modernizations, basically to undo the damage that Mao's Cultural Revolution did. Do you know the four modernizations, Ari?
I don't.
Agriculture, industry, defense, science, and technology. Okay, these are the four things
That's
that
5.
they want to focus on. Science and technology is one. Okay.
No.
All right. We do. The problem is that we talk about the fifth modernization later that some people try to push, but so it is a little confusing. But Zhou dies in January of 1976 of bladder cancer at 77.
Ooh. It's a rough one.
Yeah, it's not great. Interesting facts about Zhou. He had actually been a member of the KMT from 1923 to 1927.
What happened?
Not much. I think he's just in there shortly, probably
Was he
mostly
expelled
as
from the party.
I assume probably mostly as the kind of as like something he had to do when the KMT had more power. He also had 2 kids, and both of them were adopted.
So they didn't have any kids. He adopted 2 kids.
Well, he adopted 2 kids. Those are his kids, though.
When you say you have kids, it's more like
Well, I don't mean as like you birthed them, which a man doesn't do in any case.
how sexist can you be right now?
Yeah,
I
that's-
can't believe
That's
you.
true. I'm erasing. I'm doing erasure. Sorry, I apologize. Okay, so he, as a cis. All right. So Mao.
Give up on that fact.
So Zhou had been a big target of criticism where they ran this campaign. Mao and the Gang of Four ran this campaign called "Criticize Leng, Criticize Confucius." Yeah. And so it was
I've
headed.
seen posters of that. I have pictures.
Yeah, man, I would like to get. I love so many posters at this time.
have
So
that
many
book.
propaganda posters. Yeah, I need to look through that.
I can pull it out.
All right, we should
I'll
go.
pull it out
we
right
should
now.
go through it sometime.
You keep going. Just pretend that I'm listening.
Yeah, Ari doesn't care anyway.
No, I do.
So,
I promise.
So, Gang of Four, Ari. I want to know who is in the Gang of Four. All right, we'll wait for Ari.
Mao's wife and all her art friends.
Which wife?
The later one.
Yeah, fourth and final, which is but don't worry. I mean, I know a lot of people are thinking, "Wow, Mao, what a great man, wonderful guy, did so much for China. How could he only have 4 total wives? That's really sad." Don't worry, he had a lot of 14-year-old concubines, so it's cool. Yeah, it was Jiang Qing, which is Mao's 4th wife, Zhang Chunqiao, who was a political theorist and member of the Politburo and Standing Committee, Yao Wenyuan, who was a literary critic and a member of the Politburo, and Wang Hongwen, who was a labor activist and the second vice chairman of the CCP. Okay, so the big thing is, yeah, everyone knows Jiang Qing, and that's the most important one probably for the Gang of Four.
I just knew she was the last one. I didn't remember her name.
Fourth and final. Everyone can remember
Was
that.
she the one who was related to Jiang Jieshi?
That I'm not sure of. But could be. It's possible with a name like Jiang. So when Zhou dies, Mao didn't even go to his funeral and basically forbade CCP leadership from wearing black armbands, which they usually wore to show mourning. So a couple months later, remember he dies on January 8th.
You talking about Mao?
I'm talking about Zhou. We'll talk about Mao's death in a second. So later, actually, it's really interesting because we're both having they were having during the tomb sweeping holiday in April. So on April 5th, tomb sweeping holiday, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically where you go to your ancestors where they're buried and sweep their tomb or take care of them or give them some sort of like offerings, etc. So like on April 5th, thousands of people gather in Tiananmen to pay respects to Zhou and mourn. And they also, because of how basically the Gang of Four and Mao dealt with his death, they were pretty upset with them. So, but a lot of the anger, people like kind of reserve anger away from Mao because he's the penultimate leader. So like it's like dangerous to kind of go against him. So a lot of people direct their anger at the Gang of Four. Also at this time, Mao's health is not super great. He's not doing super hot. So the Gang of Four is kind of running things anyway. So obviously,
Wait, so who are the other ones?
Who are the other what?
There was his wife, and then who else was there again?
A bunch of other people whose names you won't remember. You can listen back if you want to hear it. Zhang Chunqiu.
Yeah, but who were they?
Like I said, see, you're looking at that book now. This is a bad choice.
They're friends. They're friends of his wife's?
Some of them are. I mean, they're members of the Politburo and the Standing Committee. One of them is a literary critic and a member of the Politburo. And another one is a labor activist and vice chairman.
How
of
did
the
he get
CCP.
that position, though, if not through basically sharing power with his wife?
Well, they obviously did share power with his wife, but
So she's the core.
she's kind of the
She's
head
the
of.
core leader.
She's at least the face of it. In terms of the inner workings, I don't know exactly who was making the decisions, but it sure seemed like she was at least the mouthpiece of it. So
I was gonna make a dirty joke, but
yeah, make as little as possible because I need to edit this in like very quickly. So we're gonna try to self-censor a little bit, not too much though, because we still gotta have fun. So they start protesting, and they're not just protesting. They're not just paying respects to Zhou. They're also protesting against the Gang of Four and things like that, and also Mao a little bit. And so the PLA is obviously ordered to disperse the crowd, and about 400 people get arrested. And then, like you mentioned earlier, this is often called the April 5th movement.
is it May 4th? May 4th.
This one isn't. May the 4th movement was in 1919, and that it was also at Tiananmen, but it was basically protesting the Treaty of Versailles. And
Well, that's the famous
the
one.
Shandong issue. Yeah, this one I mean this one is not probably, especially if you're looking at like Chinese media. This one is not going to be as talked about because it's not as convenient. But Zhou Enlai has been, and some of these people have been like slightly cleaned up. They've had their past cleaned up a little bit to be more respectable. But anyway, this one is called the April 5th movement. The one in 1919 is May 4th. There's a lot of these date plus movement, date plus incidents in Chinese and Taiwanese history. Gets confusing.
Was Beijing even the capital in 1919? I feel like the capital then was Nanjing. So why were they having this major protest in like just another city? It's not relevant. Never mind.
Yeah, good question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head. I know.
Some history podcast.
I always forget that Ari's going to ask me like questions not anywhere related to the topic that I prepared for.
I mean, it's just a tangential question. Like,
No,
that you brought up.
I understand. Well, you actually brought it up. I was talking about the April 5th, and you started talking about May 4th, something that happened like 60 years before. But yes, it's very much my fault. Everything is always my fault.
You got to take responsibility.
I need to make
good of
sure
you.
I bring a whip out here and keep Ari on subject.
You mean by whipping yourself?
Yeah,
Then
I
I'll
think
feel bad I won't
I think
criticize you.
self-flagellation is really important to show penance, and
I was going to tell another dirty joke. But I'm not going to now.
so, like you alluded to, Mao dies in September, on the 9th of September in 1976. His successor was Hua Guofang.
You didn't last long, right?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't long for the head of China. Not strong enough, and not short enough, because the guy that replaced him was 4'11". So this was partially because Mao had the Politburo.
All the doors lowered.
Yeah, the Politburo denounced Deng Xiaoping and had him replaced with Hua. Hua was pretty threatened by the Gang of Four, so he basically just had them arrested on October 6th. So like a month after Mao dies, he just arrests the Gang of Four and charges them with like counter-revolutionary activities.
Noise.
And
Why did it take him a month?
I mean, he probably had to like get his affairs in order and make sure he had everyone who was going to stay on his side.
You'd think like the Gang of Four, if they knew it was what, as the second Mao died, they would have either consolidated power or killed him. And like the fact that they did it means that they basically let it happen. Because giving someone a month to arrest you, like we watched the movie Death of Stalin, like that.
It's true.
That kind of like politics post-death what's the word? Transition, not transition. Transition of power. I feel like there's a better succession politics. Like in a dictatorship like that happens very fast. You need to be on your toes if you want to stay alive, much less in power.
Yeah, I wonder exactly what was going on behind the scenes, because I assume
incompetence.
I assume both of them were trying to consolidate their power, and Hua just won out, but could be wrong.
Yeah, but he didn't keep his power, so that makes me question.
Obviously, I mean, I think everything was kind of. I think everyone was probably. I can't imagine they were that caught off guard with how sick Mao was, but I think they had to, because like there's the famous story of them when Nixon comes, they like take the medical equipment that they had brought in case Nixon was attacked off of the plane and basically use it on Mao to keep him alive. And he only meets with Nixon for like a few minutes because he's like on death's door. But I assume a lot of it was people didn't know exactly where they were going to side. Because there were also obviously people coalescing behind Deng at this time.
Do you think they would have learned their lessons? Because like watching what happened with Stalin, I mean, you basically have like hours, if not days.
Watching history, people do not learn their lessons. Sorry,
well,
but yeah,
that's why they lost power and died.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, doomed to repeat it and all that trite stuff. So basically, Hua comes to power and basically says, "I'll just do whatever the fuck Mao would want to do." He comes out
Hua
with
like flower. It's a weird name.
No, I think actually no. It's Hua like Hua Red.
A Hua. Okay. Okay, we can listen to the peaceful Buddhist music. It's not Buddhist music probably because it's from the paganist Taoist temple.
Yes, I was right. So he comes up with this thing called the two whatevers policy. He has this basically speech, this policy called the two whatevers, the Angefangsi. And it basically
the translations for these terms are so bad.
That's what they call it. I agree, though.
Called two modes, two ways of doing things.
Yeah, the two whatevers.
The
two doings. Because he would uphold whatever policy decisions Chairman Mao had made, and also unswervingly follow whatever instructions Chairman Mao gave. So he's just doing whatever Mao wants him to do. Oh, that cat almost got that pigeon. Oh my gosh.
I gave this cat some meat the other day. I'm glad he's still alive. Because that meat probably was covered in garlic.
That cat has eaten way worse. So on July 21st, 1977, so we're in next year now, Deng comes to power. He comes back as the prime minister of State Council and vice chairman of the CCP. He brought a bunch of people who had been purged in the anti-rightist campaign, and
The Cultural Revolution, you mean?
Some of it was anti-rightist and some of it was cultural revolution, and
That's
sometimes
the
it was
same?
both. No, the
What's the
anti-rightist
distinction?
anti-rightist was in the 50s.
They were both purging people who they consider as heterodox and not sufficiently leftist.
Correct. It's the,
So what's the difference?
It's the same idea. Time periods.
Just the time period.
Yeah, just different time periods. I mean, the Cultural Revolution also encompasses a lot of different things,
What the fuck is this?
like a lot of reforms and stuff.
Oh my gosh, this chair is like flaking off fucking paint.
That's what you want.
Not what I want.
Plastic in my blood. This is good for podcasting.
This is one of those alley chairs that was created in the 1930s. It's itching my skin. Like paint flakes. I'm listening.
I don't want all your nonsensical noises recorded in the background.
Too bad.
Everyone's gonna be so mad. Any criticism I get for this podcast automatically goes on Ari.
People like the real stuff.
Sounds so we're just living our lives.
We are living our lives.
Well, that's not wrong. I'm glad the sun's coming out though. Oh, it's gonna be a beautiful day. So about 130,000 people come back at this time from being purged in these various campaigns.
When you say come back, you mean come back from the countryside to Beijing.
Basically, yeah, come out of being purged, come back to the party.
Does it include Xi Jinping's father?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that. But Deng comes back and he's just firing at Hua. On May 24th.
So he brings him back and then he starts talking shit.
I don't think it's directly him that brought him back, but yeah, he brings these people back, and obviously they're coming for the throne. So Deng wrote an essay called "The Two Whatevers Policy Does Not Accord with Marxism." Bang, bang, bang! Shots fired, boys.
The two whatever.
It's such a dumb policy
It's
name.
a stupid name.
But he wasn't alone. Hu Yaobang, who will become an important part of the story, also published "Pragmatism and the Truth," and the article basically pointed out the difference between Hua and Deng.
Translation.
That one's better than the two whatevers policy does not accord with Marxism. So soon after, it's not just the elites basically yelling at each other about theory, because that's basically modern day Twitter. It's just rich people sitting in their parents' basements slinging theory. I don't think you've read your theory very well.
I don't think they've read anything. That's why they're on Twitter.
I don't know.
If you read books, your eyes aren't good enough to get on a computer.
Facts, folks. Those are facts. So a lot of people start. This is where we get moving towards democracy walls. A lot of people start making these big character posters. Okay, which is
And I already put away the poster.
yeah, you put away the poster book. Maybe we should do it like we can do like a Twitch stream or a YouTube stream where we go through the book a little bit, show some of our favorite posters.
That book is not good. I looked through it. It's not. There's not a lot of the really good political posters are not in there. Like a lot of it is kind of like dumb shit because they want to have like a variety, but you lose all the good kind of political richness of like the controversial posters.
So this one is stuff like, oh, look at our science and technology. Here's Deng Xiaoping shaking hands with the dictator of Albania.
Like that kind of stuff. And the real fun stuff is like we're going to whatever. What is it? 我们一定要解放 Taiwan, like that kind of stuff, like
they're smashing Taiwan's cultural artifacts with a
political
hammer.
core stuff.
Yeah, we should maybe we should put together our own slideshow of the sickest political posters and go through them. Talk about
Just
how
do
cool
a
they
Google
are.
image search, you'll find better stuff than this book.
Well, no. Watch our Twitch stream of us Googling it. So in like I said, after this, there's a lot of people starting taking to the streets, making their own posters, these big character posters that if you've seen pictures of like 1970s, you've probably seen pictures of these posters. It's just big Mandarin characters written on them. So this kind of starts Democracy Wall. So in June and July of 1978, more and more of these posters are going up, especially around University of in Beijing. A lot of them criticizing the Gang of Four. Some
criticize. Clear, the big character
Deng.
poster is not about people characters. It's about like
Mandarin
text
characters.
written, in big
Mandarin
characters. It's
yeah.
like a slogan, which
Yeah.
I think again is a very poor translation.
Big word posters.
Yeah, well, they should just say it's a slogan posters.
It's just a direct translation, is why.
Yeah, but the way you put it in English, it sounds like there's like
Anime.
cartoon bunnies, Mickey Mouse,
Dragon Ball Z.
really big Mickey Mouse all over China.
Yes, it's Dazibao. Big word posters.
Why don't you just say like slogans? Like their slogans is what it is.
Well, we can. I mean, we do it all the time. We can make our own words.
I love making my own words.
Sloganeering placards.
Every
So
time you give me one of those Twitter acronyms from now on, I'm just gonna like make up a new word at you.
that's fine. We create our own dictionary here, the FCP dictionary.
You're like, this guy's really base. I'm like, yeah, he's so Miranda.
Yeah. All right.
He's
so
a twofold.
So Democracy Wall, he's a Tubin, I hope. So Democracy Wall is between November 1978 and December 1979. This is also sometimes called the Beijing Spring. Lots of these.
Oh, that's a sick music festival.
Lots of these. Yeah, when you go to the Beijing Spring, you can see lots of big characters on posters.
I bet you can.
So you see a lot of these slogan posters, as Ari has rewritten history. These are, like we kind of mentioned, they're commonly used in propaganda, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of this is taking place along this certain brick wall in Xidan, in Xiseng, in Beijing. So the CCP kind of allows this to happen as like a pressure release valve. It seems like that's my reading of the
When
situation.
is this taking place? 89?
Do you not
88?
listen to anything I say?
Repeat it for the audience.
November 1978 to December 1979.
Okay.
Ari's just like spacing
I'm skipping
out,
ahead. No, I'm skipping ahead.
Trying to
I'm
get- you're
confusing
trying to-
the 79 one and the 89
trying to
one.
get there faster. So this is the quote unquote democracy wall period, and it's this kind of idea of like a pressure release valve. We actually recently just saw this with what happened with the lockdowns in Shanghai. Is they would let people kind of throughout get away with like saying stuff that they normally wouldn't allow them to say generally, or at least would be censored a lot faster, it seems like, on places like Weibo. But they kind of just like let it happen, and then after a couple of days they just delete it. But this, you see a lot of this continuation of like people debating different ideas and thinking about how we need to reform the system that's obviously quite broken. So one example of this was, there's one called Firelighter of Democracy Wall, Lu Pu. This is in November of 1978. He basically posts this poster that is basically talking about the issues with the economy, thought control, and squalid living conditions for average Chinese citizens. I would love to like get really in depth about Lu Pu and exactly what this document said, but I tried to find it, and the only place where it was in a collection was $600 on fucking eBay. So I couldn't get this. It wasn't even on some of the other sites that I sometimes use to get the documents.
I bet you can find it somewhere.
I bet I could, but I wasn't going. I literally spent an hour looking for this book all over the internet and could not find it.
How about archive.org?
I don't. In what form?
Any form.
I couldn't. I didn't find it. So I don't know. I need to look more, but this is for next year's. This is now that I have everything else written out. I can focus on some of these like more these smaller issues. I would also like a few of these things. I think could be their own whole stories. Like I think you could do a whole podcast on like the Lin Biao incident, or like the original Tiananmen, or the May the 5th.
Yeah, it'd probably be
May the
okay.
4th, I mean.
This is a lot of, like, this is like 40 years of history crammed.
Yeah, we got to
in,
go.
like,
I mean, I want to give people some background, but it's we can't like go into detail, or this will be a 10-hour series, which hopefully one day it will be, but we don't have that kind of time
Or
right
money.
now. So you also have a lot of groups forming at this time, which will kind of lead to subsequent groups that will go to become some inspire maybe some of the groups at Tiananmen. So you have one called the Democracy Assembly Group that was created by a bunch of young people, and one of them was the guy his name is Ren Wanding, who eventually would go on to form the China Human Rights League and also be jailed a ton of times, including on June 4th, 1989, in the Tiananmen Square Massacre. Okay.
Did he survive it?
Yeah, he survived, but yeah, I forget exactly how many years he did in jail, but he was arrested like 4 or 5 times. If
he still alive now?
recollection calls. That I'm not sure of. I think he is. A couple of these people are still alive. So things are kind of getting a little bit more serious. It started off as kind of just like, we're upset about corruption. We want like the CCP to like take care of us. And then they start getting slightly more seditious. So I know, Ari, you're thinking, what does that 4'11" dictator think about this? What does Deng Xiaoping think about this?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Kissinger.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about Kissinger later. I got some. I actually quote his book a little bit in here.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's an okay book.
Yeah.
I like that one.
It's got some good info in it, even though he's a piece of trash. So basically, at the beginning, Deng Xiaoping is kind of like, well, they're basically going after like Mao and the Gang of Four and Hua. So like, and who cares? Like, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm capable of taking like some mild criticism. There's actually a story about him meeting with a delegation from the Democratic Socialist Party from Japan, and he was explaining that like, actually, oh no, these protests, kind of just like airing of grievances, are totally legal under like the Constitution of the PRC. You know, so he but one thing he said that he didn't like was the criticisms of Mao, because he wanted to be like the 5-foot version of Mao on steroids bought through the free market. So of course eventually it doesn't end there. People are like pissed and start calling out like specific people for like graft, like local politicians, and there's also like more and more anti-Dengist rhetoric. I mentioned earlier about the 5th modernization. There's
The internet.
Hell yeah. One of the worst modernizations, might I add.
Oh, Twitter.
Well, I would just say the internet, mostly in general, but specifically, yes, social media. There was a tract posted called The 5th Modernization, Democracy and Others, which advocated for adding democracy to the 4 modernizations.
Okay.
Do you remember the 4 modernizations?
No.
Agriculture, industry, science and technology, and national defense. So they want to add democracy to this, which is pretty cool. In this tract, it basically discusses the histories of Russia, Germany, China, and talks about how anti democratic ideals were some of the main reasons that they had poor living conditions in these countries. Which you read that and you're like, fucking absolutely right. You know what his solution was? Follow Yugoslavia's model, and that would bring economic prosperity to China, which I don't
make shitty cars.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. That one didn't work out so well. But you had me in the first half. You had me there. But Yugoslavia thing, maybe rethink that. But it was written by a guy named Wei Jingsun, and he would go on to be arrested like a bunch of times, spending 18 years in jail, which is the story of a lot of these people that just like keep going in and out of jail, like joining these protests in like democracy movements. So like I said, they're getting more and more specific about like atrocities that they faced, especially in the Cultural Revolution, but also just like getting screwed over by local politicians and things like that. So you have like the rise of this kind of like zine culture as well. They're creating
No comment.
creating like these like personal made like journals is maybe a better word for ivory tower academic like our friend Ari here. No reaction. So they're basically self-publishing these things. So there's not like it's not super easy. There's no Kinkos yet. Deng hasn't like made China a super capitalist state as of yet. So they had like small print ranges, like 200 to 500, but they're still like widely read and like passed among groups and had a lot of feedback. There was also like a creation of like a cafe culture where people would like go and have like these political discussions. These journals and the cafe culture, a lot of it is still just like debating on like what form of Marxism is the best. But it's starting to branch outside of this and talk about like what kind of reforms that can move on. So eventually, as this kind of expands and gets bigger and bigger, the leadership is getting like less and less happy about this, and eventually they decide to pull all of their troops out of their illegal invasion of Vietnam and stick them on their own citizens.
I think they were losing that war. Maybe that's why.
I think you're probably right. That might have played a bigger role. They also had local police that could have done it, but you know, we like to do a little revisionist history, right? So there's also like starting to be criticism of some of these capitalist reforms, thanks to, of course, people like Deng pushing for opening up the economy, but also thanks to American cucks like Carter and Nixon and Kissinger. So you have people who are like, they're putting in this foreign investment, and people are losing their jobs because
He didn't blame Ford.
Huh?
Ford was in between there.
Well, okay, fine. Fuck Ford too. I blame Carter and Nixon more though, and Kissinger. But fine, we'll tack Ford on there as well. So yeah, there's a lot of pushback on this because, like I said, people are losing their jobs or like sometimes in some cases getting like worse benefits and things like that. So the last person we really need to talk about before we get into Tiananmen itself is Hu Yaobang. Hu Yaobang was born in like a poor Hakka family in Hunan, and a lot of elites like Mao, for instance, were like born into wealth. Mao's father was poor, but he eventually made a ton of money farming. Became like this big farming guy with a lot of money, which is why like Mao had all this access to books and stuff. That's a little bit of a simplification of the history, but so it shall suffice for now. But you have a decent amount of these people coming from like slightly wealthier families. Hu Yaobang was poor as fuck. He was also got into the CCP like super young. He was kind of just a hustler from very young. He got at 12. He joined his first rebellion, and at 14, he left to join the CCP. He left his family to join the CCP. So he like quickly becomes a full member, and he backs Mao. Like in the 30s, there's a lot of like factionalization inside the CCP, and he backs Mao. And then soon after, they go on the Long March, and he's like one of the youngest people to go on the Long March, and obviously one of the very few people that survived. So anyone that doesn't know the Long March, basically the KMT had the Mao's army, the Red Army, on the run. It's like a series of marches, basically. So they marched over 9,000 kilometers over 370 days from October to October 1934 to 1935. So it's quite a long time. And it was over something like the roughest terrain in Western China. There are different estimates on this, but there's about 85,000 soldiers on this march when it started, and at the end, some say that only 8,000 survived. There are different estimates on that, but that was one that I saw. So who joins this march and survives, possibly because he was kind of one of the younger ones. I think he would have been about 19 when this happened. And he was almost beheaded.
By who?
I believe by KMT forces. But there's a story about him like on his way to be beheaded, and he gets saved. And there's another story of him at the Battle of Mount Lu when he was like dying on the side of the road. I think he had been shot. He had been injured in some way and was saved by like
A wolf.
he he said that his like the medics saw him and abandoned him, but one of his friends who was a Chinese Red Army commander like came and saved him. So after this, he keeps rising like pretty quickly through power, becomes the Communist Youth League leader in 1952 and does that until 1966. He was appointed by Mao to be the first party secretary of Sanxi. Sorry, not Sanxi. Sanxi. And during the Cultural Revolution, he's purged twice, but always managed to come back, similar to Deng. And Deng was one of his mentors, so they had a weird like kind of like love-hate relationship where Hu would criticize him a lot, but like they were still like supported each other in a lot of ways. I don't know. Relationships in the CCP sounds very strange. During his second purge, he was sent to herd cattle, which is kind of cool. It's not the worst job, I would say. Probably not fun. He was recalled in 1977, shortly after Mao's death, and he became a propagandist for the Politburo. Which speaking of propaganda posters, I would like to find some of his posters if he made any. He was the estimate that I have seen, and this is from Chinese sources, so take that with a grain of salt, is that he helped exonerate over 3 million people and like restore their status to society, like unpurge them basically. So some people give him a lot of credit for this, and obviously like a lot of Chinese people gave him credit, as we'll see in a little bit, especially young people, for kind of like being a moderating force. So he actually supported Democracy Wall, again engendering him to like the average people or the people who have like critiques of the government, and he also opposed the two whatevers. Again, terrible translation. In 1982, he's the second most powerful man in China. So that's like a pretty big move, basically from dirt farmer to like second most powerful dude. So here I'm going to do a quick rundown of some controversial things, and then we're gonna get really quickly into Tiananmen. So controversial things about Hu. In 1980, he went and visited Tibet, and he ordered a lot of Han out of the area, and he said that he believed that the Tibetans could rule themselves, and they should rule themselves. And he also ordered that any Han that remained in Tibet have to learn Tibet and Uyghur.
Uyghur? Why?
I believe there was some. I think
There's no.
this is
Uyghurs
also
there.
talking about Xinjiang.
Oh. Well.
So
So he's probably talking about just learn the language of that respective place.
right. Because he also visited Xinjiang. So basically like it shouldn't be like mistaken. He's not like calling for their independence, but he's obviously calling for like better conditions. And he apologized for like China's misrule. He also made new requirements, basically improve conditions, education, increase state funds, revive local traditions. So instead of doing this like slow or sometimes kind of fast roll cultural genocide that the CCP is doing nowadays, he was at least saying that they should be able to keep their local cultures. In Xinjiang, he ordered for the Bingtuan, which are like often called soldier farmers in English, to be ended, but that didn't work because they still exist today, and they're one of like the worst occupying forces in Xinjiang. More controversial opinions, hot takes by our buddy Hu. He said that Chinese people could start eating like Westerners, basically using individual plates with forks and knives. And he said
hell
this.
yeah, brother.
I don't know. I actually prefer chopsticks.
I like spoons.
Spoons are good though. Spoons
Like
are
a
good.
big
But he's saying
shovel.
forks and knives. I'm not a huge fan of forks. Knives are good, but forks I don't know.
Just have spoons for everyone.
Sporks or spives. Like a spoon with a knife on the side. So he offered this as like a way to reduce diseases. He's also one of the first people to drop the Mao suit in favor of like a Western suit, which I don't know, based or not, Ari.
I don't understand that acronym.
Is that cool?
It's very Miranda.
Well, I don't know what Miranda means.
Very spuffoon.
It's nonsensical. It's like
Just
trying.
like base.
It's like no. That's a word that like the vast majority of people know. You're the
The
only one.
vast majority of Ask Ben.
People on Twitter. Ben does know what it knows. He said it to me before. Ben definitely knows what base means. Okay.
Ask any of your coworkers.
All right, but you answer the question. Is that
I don't know what the
cool?
question is asking.
Is that cool or not?
Is it cool to drop the Mao suit?
Yeah. Or is it cooler to keep the Mao suit?
It's who the fuck is he to like make rules for people's attire? People should wear whatever they want.
This wasn't him making a rule. This is just him doing it himself.
Yeah, then I agree. He should do whatever he wants.
Okay.
If he wants to go naked to the standing committee, that's his prerogative.
I don't know. I might have stuck with the Mao suit, but that's all right.
It's hot as shit.
Western style suits are pretty hot too. But yeah, you're not wrong.
So go shirtless.
That would have been really revolutionary, as if he was like, no, only
Overalls.
floral pattern shirts with open to the third button.
Those are hot as shit too. They're all synthetic fibers.
Well, you can make them out of cotton, Ari.
You could, but nobody does. Let's just be real.
This is off the rails. Unbelievable, Ari. He also this is one thing that I think is definitely based, is that he said
I still
that
don't understand what that means.
he was asked which one of Mao's theories he said they asked him which of Mao's theories were desirable in modern China. Do you know which one he picked?
Racial hegemony.
He said, I think none, which is pretty cool. He encouraged people to discuss controversial issues like media in the media, such as human rights, democracy, and also limits on CCP control.
He's a pretty controversial reformer.
Yeah, which is really cool. I mean, these are just things he's talking about. It's not anything that he like fully implemented. But I don't know that he would have had the power to do that on alone anyway. But at least he's getting the ideas out there. He also tried to tidy up relations with Japan. So in 1984, which was the 12th anniversary of Japan recognizing the PRC diplomatically, which is not based, he invited 3,000 Japanese youths to tour China.
Where does that word base come from?
Who knows? I think it comes from the base god. This is going to get into like a whole different history.
I think it's probably
podcast.
from freebasing meth.
Maybe.
Cocaine.
Freebasing cocaine is not based.
I don't know what that means.
He got a ton of... I know, I'm going to keep saying it, though, because it's funny to listen to your boomer ass just like being upset about it. But he got a ton of shit for inviting all these Japanese people to tour China, because Japan only invited 500 Chinese to do the same thing in Japan. And he would also give like extravagant gifts to Japanese officials visiting China. Also, one of his most scandalous moments was he allowed his daughter to meet privately with the Japanese prime minister's son. Ooh. He called for the reduction of the defense budget twice in two years in a row. Also was chastised for drinking soup too loudly at a banquet hosted by Elizabeth II, which
that happens to me all the time.
That's king shit, man. Fuck royalty. You should always do stuff like that to like embarrass them. He also criticized Deng for being indecisive and old-fashioned. But when Deng heard about this, he was not too pleased, let's say. So yeah, like he's kind of radical for within like the confines of the CCP. And what we will do is for the second part, we'll come back and talk about soon after this he gets purged, or he is forced to resign. He's not totally purged, but he's forced to resign. So that's where we'll pick back up. And Ari's going to spend about 2 hours researching what the word based means. So when we come back, he'll have a full grasp on this beautiful term.
I'm going to go do work that I get paid for instead.
Ari's going to get super black-pilled on Twitter verbiage, as if he's not already.
I'll do no such thing.
All right, folks, we love you. Be ready. The next episode should be up very soon. So we love you. We'll talk to you soon.
FCP 最大。